we're not going to sit there and only watch 3 clips after a game, but we're also going to try to keep it to a minimum. And if we show the grading, reflect a little bit of that with 5 or 6 clips. And then, we really try to celebrate our guys, especially offensively. You are what you celebrate and tolerate. And so there needs to be a healthy balance there. And, we want our guys to see all the things they're doing correctly.
Welcome to the Jamodi Podcast. We are all surrounded by amazing coaches and leaders. So let's get an inside look at not just what they do, but how they do what they do. After all, becoming the best versions of ourselves is Jamodi, just a matter of doing it.
Today we're joined by the head boys basketball coach at Second Baptist School in Houston, Texas, Taylor Land. Coach Land had a successful playing career at St. Edward's University and then played professionally in Denmark and Australia from 2010 to 2016. After playing, he joined the staff at St. Edward's as an assistant coach. He spent 5 years at University of the Incarnate Word and then spent 1 season as an assistant at Longwood University, where they became Big South champs and made an NCAA tournament appearance. Coach Land took over the Second Baptist program in 2024 and led the Eagles to a 33-4 record and a TAPS 5A state championship. He was named TAPS 5A Coach of the Year and Houston Chronicle Private School Coach of the Year. Before we hear from Coach, take a moment to subscribe to our podcast and follow us on social media at Jamodi Podcast.
Welcome to the Ballology app Ultimate Demo. Trusted by leaders in the game. Ballology is a player development platform built for coaches and players alike. You can expect live shot tracking, workout libraries, and AI insights. You can easily chart team shooting drills in practice or in training sessions. Track all of those shots using an iPhone or an Android device in real time. You can view your team's performance through a video archive or by using our shot charts. After every shooting workout, take a look at your breakdown by viewing your percentages and your shot locations. Let's take a deeper look to learn how to make the most out of the Ballology app. Let's see how you measure up in the Ballology Skills Assessment, where you can test your shooting skills versus other shooters worldwide. Navigate to Ballology AI, where you can ask any question to get answers in real time for smarter training.
Make that footwork a little more sharp.
Coaches or players can create custom workouts in just minutes. Hit your on-court skills or basketball IQ or even strength and conditioning. It can be done on the Ballology app. Compete with everything you do on the Ballology app through our workout leaderboards. Elevate your game with the Ballology app. Download it for free today.
Well, man, I just want to thank you so much for giving up your time, coming on and talking hoops with me. I had the pleasure of getting to watch your team play against Grace Prep and in your first year at Second Baptist, winning it and playing the way you guys did, man. Congratulations. And again, thank you so much for doing this.
No, I appreciate it. It's been a blast. And, enjoyed being back in Texas and getting to do some coaching. And place at Second Baptist has been incredible. So I appreciate it.
So where were you at a little before Second Baptist? Because I do want to get into your time at St. Ed's and didn't realize that connection there with Coach Cook, which is awesome. So where were you before?
Oh yeah, Andre's the best. I was at Longwood last year with or the year previous to this one with Griff Aldrich, and then prior to that, I spent 5 years with Carson Cunningham at Incarnate Word, and 2 with Andre from 2016 to 2018.
How was it going back there and coaching after having a great playing career there? I would imagine I'm probably never going to be on the Baylor staff. I'm pretty sure. And so I won't know what that feels like. Was that a pretty cool experience?
Oh, it was great. Yeah, I played for a guy named Ryan Marks. Ryan's the head coach up at St. Francis in Joliet, and had a great experience there as a player. St. Ed's was a wonderful place to kind of figure things out for 18 to 22-year-olds, and we had guys from all over the world on our team. And then, Andre and Ryan are really good friends, but they would probably be the first to tell you that style-wise and personality-wise, very different. And so getting to work for somebody that just has a totally different approach in a lot of ways was, it was really educational. And it took me about a year to really figure out how to be, a qualified assistant for Andre. And then the second year with him, I thought we really hit our stride, and it was he was great at just kind of giving me some latitude to figure that out a little bit in my really my first year as a full-time college coach.
What were some of those differences that you ran into? I was able to have a hoops talk with Coach Cook, so I have a little bit of an idea of how he plays and how he sees the game. But what were some of those things that you had to adjust to a little bit?
I think Ryan grew up in Chicago. Phil Jackson era, ran the triangle offense, very vision oriented with the team. And, we had March of the Penguins was the movie that we watched my freshman year to kind of set the vision for what a real team is like. And, Andre's from New York, hilarious. I mean, really quick on his feet, different style in terms of motion offense, and just communication wise with the guys. And, I think that both of them have proven how to be extremely effective over the years. But just as an assistant, I think your job is to make the head coach's job as easy as possible and figure out, okay, what does he like to eat on his plate, and how do I make sure that I clear everything else off? And every guy is going to have different things that he prefers to do. And so I didn't even know that approach was supposed to be, the way to do it when I first got there. I just finished playing in Australia, and thought I had a lot of ideas and remember what it was like playing for Ryan. And I get in and I'm working for Andre, and I'm like, okay, this is there's a thousand ways to skin a cat, as I think Gene Katie used to say, and I need to figure out the way that he's doing it. So it was really good to learn that, and Andre, like I said, incredible at how to communicate that stuff.
And I think a couple good nuggets there for assistant coaches. Like I don't know if I was always a good assistant coach for Wes Watson at McKinney High School. I think I was really young and pretty arrogant and thought that my way was the best. I don't know if I really ever thought about what can I take off of his plate? How can I make his life easier? So I really like that. But then also coming into a new place with humility and being open to learn new things. I think those are two good nuggets that you shared. March of the Penguins. Is that something that you share with your team at the beginning of the year? Because I never thought about that until this moment.
The journey that they take 70 miles inland to find a mate, and then how there's ones that are lost along the way. And when we go through a season, whether it's somebody's grandma or just issues that come up amongst the team, that you're dealing with some sort of tragedy a lot of times. He was really good at weaving all that in. And, I think the image of the Penguins having to trade places on the outside of the circle in the frozen tundra, of the sacrifice that gets made there for the betterment of the group. He was great at getting all that across to us. And I haven't used that one with my team, but we'll do a movie every year, and we'll have a team vision to it. And we did Remember the Titans this year, and one of the things that helped
Nice.
was we just kept that soundtrack kind of playing throughout the year in practices and stuff as sort of a reminder of what we watched early on in the season.
That's interesting. I like a lot of people talk about themes throughout the year, but I don't know if I've ever heard a movie, kind of tied to it. Like the first one that popped in my head that would be kind of cool, but is Warrior. The two brothers that are the
Yeah.
UFC fighters and stuff. But I'm trying to think now, like I don't know how that would really tie in with the team. Remember the Titans, obviously, and when you kind of because I've seen marching the Penguins. What is it?
March of the Penguins.
March of the Penguins. I've seen that before. I would have never have thought this is team building, but you're right. Like there are so many things that they go through. It's an incredible movie, but that they go through that is similar to what you could go through with the team. But awesome. So you did Remember the Titans. What were some of the others that maybe you've done that you thought, man, that was awesome or perfect?
And Mark's being a Chicago guy, we watched one on Ron Santo of the Cubs and kind of what he went through in his life. We watched another one that was a crossword puzzle deal, how the New York crossword was put together, and that kind of puzzle piece element to a team. Man, there's another one that was I wasn't with the team, but the guys called me that were still on the team. That I think it was a man. Who is the Michelin? Is it 3-star chef out in Japan that works in the subway? And it's called Dreams of. I can't remember what his name is, but anyway,
Okay.
he was always taking true stories and then relating them back to basketball. And for some reason, I think that disconnects where it wasn't necessarily a basketball movie stuck with us throughout the year somehow.
Yeah. There's some genius with that. Like, you've got to be pretty creative. You got to be able to connect some dots. I don't know. Like, again, my Warrior movie, it's just a cool movie. I'd probably have to spend a lot of time to figure out a connection,
Oh
but
yeah,
I
well
like
that's
that
a
idea
great
though.
one. Those fighting movies are awesome. I think Tony
Yeah.
Bennett was referencing. I know Tony Bennett had Rocky on for his team at one point, whether it was in the beginning of the year or, but I know he really relied on some of those metaphors.
Coach, Midland Christian and Lubbock Christian are in our district. And so we have to go out there, or we've played in the Cap Rock before. And I take it as it's my responsibility to teach these players about Rocky. So on the way there, we'll go Rocky 1 and 2. And on the way back, we'll go 3 and 4. Never really, always skip 5. And sometimes I've shown Balboa 6. But I'm not doing my
I
job
love that.
if these faith players, graduate without watching the series, because a lot of them have never seen it.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I mean, I'd love to hear a little bit about your daily habits as you're a great player. I didn't even know about playing overseas in Australia and the career you had. And then you've coached with some amazing people. And then, like we said, to be in your first season and have a 33-4 record, but just to have an amazing group like you did. What are some of those daily habits that help you every day set you up for success?
My mom and dad were routine people in terms of my mom ran marathons, so she was getting up in the morning running all the time. My dad's a sports announcer and just retired, but he had a talk show radio in the morning a lot of times too. And so, there were different ways that they would kind of book in their days, and I think that rubbed off on me. And so I always try to have a stretching routine, and whether it's a few push-ups and sit-ups and squats in the morning to just kind of get my body going, and then at night kind of have a similar routine with stretching. But about 14 years ago, I went on a tour to Israel with Athletes in Action, and a guy named John Farwell was running the tour, and he was incredible mentor, great basketball coach. And he asked a question on that tour that has stuck with me ever since. And he said, if what you believe doesn't change the way you behave, then do you believe it? And it that kind of burned for a number of years, and really the last 3 or 4 years, I've tried to read scripture every morning, and that's done some amazing things in my life. It's embarrassing that it took this long to figure that out because I was raised going to church and believed in God, and it just took a while before it really kind of came full circle. But I do try to spend at least 5 to 10 minutes in the morning just reading and reflecting a little bit to try to get my mindset right and have a right way of going about the day.
I love those things that you mentioned with the movement in the morning. There's always a difference when, like right now, we're in May, school's finishing up, but we do open weight room, open gym in the mornings, and so 6 a.m. those dudes are up there and I'm there, and so I work out while they're in the weight room. There's a huge difference in the mornings that I do that and how the rest of my day goes to those mornings where I don't, or on weekends where I sleep in. So I think you're right on the money, like starting the day that way. But man, stretching, oh, I suck at it for one, but also I just never make it a priority. So super impressed that you do both of those things, man.
Well, thanks. Helps helps me if I got to hop into a drill later on in the day, and I feel like I at least I'm semi loose.
Coach, can you still perform at a high level to where if you get in there and do something like you look good doing it? Because I'm past that. I just don't even I don't want to lose credibility. Can you
And
still
I'm
move?
I'm hanging on for dear life. I feel like it's a Toby Keith song. I'm not as good as I once was, but I'm as good
That's right.
once as I ever was. I can still make a play here and there, but don't leave me out there more than about 2 minutes. It'll get ugly.
I'm gonna just throw a quick story out. And if Jeff Clarkson he's at Prestonwood, but he was at Plano East, and then I worked for him for 1 year at Naaman Forest. I was a volunteer varsity assistant. He was the first guy to give me a job, and he could really play. He's almost 50 years old, and he can still go. He was a great player, but he's demonstrated. We're going through some zone offense stuff, and our guys just are moving it slow, and they're also not. They're not engaging too. It's not looking right, and he jumps in. He's like, guys, this is what I'm talking about. And he's going, man, he's moving it from side to side. And I'm sitting there and I was about 24, 25. So I just had gotten done playing but I'm watching him like, yes, this is what they need to see. Like right now, coach, you're doing it. And sure enough, he just goes too long and he drives and throws a no look pass that goes out of bounds. And my head just drops down and he couldn't even look me in the eye. It was like that moment of like, as a coach, how much can I show and it be believable and like this is helping my team, or how much am I just, man, I thought this guy could hoop, he can't, or is it just looking bad? That's a fine line to be on, but had to share that one. I appreciate you sharing that about your walk and getting in the word and how it took you a long time. A very similar story. I had a player named Jax O'Neal at Faith that would read the Bible every year. He'd go through it from beginning to end. And I was 40 years old and I realized in a lifetime, I don't remember a time, coach, of not having the Bible in my life. Grew up like you. I was saved when I was 5. Like this has just been a part of my life forever. I've never read through it. And it took a player at Faith to give me the motivation to start. And so I'm on my 3rd year of doing that. And you're right, man. Like there's a difference when you start the day like that and when you're constantly doing it. I think it just shapes your lens, right?
No, absolutely. No, that's really cool to hear. And you bring up Jeff Clarkson. I grew up in the Dallas Metroplex area, and you were at the Colony. I remember reading an article about your routine. I think when you would get to the gym in your dribbling routine, and then Clarkson would come and play open gyms over at Collin County whenever I was coming back during my off seasons in college. So it was fun to watch both you guys hoop.
The style of play that you guys use or played with, obviously you have some super talented players, but I was amazed at how well the ball moved through with all the talent that you had. What's your favorite style of play to teach, and how did this year's team that you had, how did they use it?
Yeah, I didn't really know what my favorite style to teach would be until about August. I said I ran the triangle in college and had a lot of different things that got to run overseas. And Carson Cunningham took a lot of stuff kind of from the NBA, and Griff Aldrich is running ball screen stuff. Andre, runs great motion offense, and so each guy that I was working for at the time, I was like, oh yeah, I like that. I'd probably do that. And we got here to Second Baptist and realized that really enjoy trying to figure out how to help the talent on our team, create the advantage and keep the advantage. And so it became pretty simple when I watched Reese Alston bring the ball off of a ball screen and have some guys like Shia Francis and Michael Pratt and Will Goolsby around. And was like, okay, we're probably going to be some ball screening and spread the floor and what do we do once we get the advantage? That was the fun part to teach was how are we moving off the ball? And we had some really unselfish guys. And so when you got like you said, you got guys that can shoot it and they're unselfish. It's a fun style to play. And I grew up going to a lot of the Spurs games during their heyday, and you'd see all those highlights of 4, 5, 6 passes in a possession, and just trying to figure out like, okay, how do we kind of recreate that in our own little identity? And we had guys that said they just shared the ball really well, and we tried to give them some freedom to do it. So I don't know if it was so much me as just trying to give them a little bit of guideline and structure and then let them play.
I think that's huge though, because I mean, you have a lot of influences, and like you said, like, man, I like how we're doing it. Maybe I'll do it like that. I mean, but the danger sometimes is picking a style of play that doesn't necessarily fit the group that you have right now. You can be so rigid in a system. I'm a system guy. This is what we do. Well, what if it really doesn't fit this group? So I think having an open mind like you did to try something and see it and then watch how the pieces work together. I see a lot of wisdom in that. Watching your team play, one thing, and I kind of made a little note about it was you played a lot of guys and you subbed guys in and out. And again, this is only one game that I watched you play. So if you weren't doing this normally, it was just because of Grace Prep or whatever, then that makes sense. You can tell me that. But what did you have a subbing or a set rotation that included short stints for guys in and out? Because when your best players were coming off the floor, man, they didn't look upset. They didn't react in a negative way. It looked like this is how we've been rotating and subbing. But I don't know, it jumped out at me.
No, yeah, that's kind of how we tried to play the whole year. I like playing a lot of guys. If you feel like the whole team is invested, I just felt, um, if you're going to do what we ask you to do in practice and exhibit a ton of effort and unselfishness, then I'm going to find ways to get you in, and you're going to get a chance to grow. And I guess the best story I can give you on our guys' mentality was in our first playoff game against Laredo St. Augustine. We had a senior who had started earlier in the year and done a great job for us. His name's Terrence Baylor, but wasn't starting later in the year. And he hadn't played in the first half. And, Reese Alston, who's first team All-State and, great player, he came over to me at the half and was like, "Hey, coach, just so you know, T hasn't gotten in yet." And I would sub him in for Reese a lot of times. And so, for a guy who's one of the best players out there to ask you that in the middle of a game, of a playoff game, it just kind of gives an indicator of how close our team was. So they're constantly cheering for each other. It made it easier for me to feel like I can sub these guys. They know they're going right back in, and we're trying to play at a really intense level on defense. I don't think we're quite there yet, but there were some good signs of it late in the year. And so, if we're going to demand you play hard on defense every possession, then I'm going to go ahead and take you out, in a decent amount of parts of the game to keep you rested.
And where does that mentality come from that he has? Is that maybe you could say it's parenting? Maybe it's just him, or it's also a culture that you guys built? Because I don't think that I think that's pretty uncommon, especially from a super talented player like that, to zoom out enough to think about this other guy and like you said, in a playoff game. Where's that come from?
Yeah, I think you're probably spot on that I think it's a combination of just, being in his DNA. It's who Reese is, but his mom and dad have done an incredible job. They say the right things to him. He's got good people in his ear. He's just fun to be around. I think he loves being here, and he's got some great teammates too, and those guys have done a great job as well. So I think that it's probably a combination of the two.
Coming from more of a college background and with your playing experience, analytics are such a huge part of it. Well, how did you use those throughout this year, and how does that kind of not affect the style of play, but maybe even scouting and things that you're doing from game to game?
Yeah, I think. Well, we definitely did some really good stuff at Longwood with just defensive grading and accountability. Marty McGillen and Ronnie Thomas and obviously Griff spearheading that. That was a lot of fun to take that stuff and try to tweak it a little bit to who our team is. Longwood doesn't press. It's more kind of a trench warfare type of style on defense and dig your heels in and be great in the gaps. But we tried to do some accountability on defense, and obviously you can only manage what you measure, and so trying to figure out kind of our own little set of analytics. I think it's the Dean Oliver. what's it called, Basketball on Paper, that he talks about the four major advantages, whether it's shooting, rebounding, turnovers, and free throws. And so I don't know if this qualifies as analytics, but it was just how do we get those four things in as many drills as possible, and then how do we measure them in games, and are we boxing out at a level of like 80% or higher? I think those things kind of helped with the points per possession. And then when we get into practices, there's a lot of times where we would scrimmage and just try to measure the analytic side of it. Of are you getting 2 points for an offensive rebound? Are you getting is the game end after two turnovers? We stole some stuff from Baylor whenever they were doing that during their national championship run, and they'd play games to 5 points, just quick games. But if you turned it over, the game was over. If you fouled, it was 2 points. Like, we tried to do some of that stuff, and tweaked a little bit to our own identity.
So many good nuggets there. I'd love to know a little bit more about some of the defensive grading things that you've done in the past. Maybe some of those, the ones that you thought like this is really good, and we can see it paying off when they're playing. So that's one thing, and then also the constraints that you're talking about. Adding more value to different things, and I love the quote that you had about things getting measured. I think that's a challenge for every coach, is like, whatever you want to see more of, then give it a higher value in practice, make it worth more. And then the things that you don't want them to do, like, make them pay for those actions, like the foul or the turnover is the game over. I think we can get more creative like that in games. So I'll just kind of let you go with that. Maybe some of the defensive grading stuff, and then just love the other part of it too.
Yeah, sure. Like I said, we're charting box outs and high hands on closeouts. I remember John Wooden being quoted of saying we're a few inches away from being a really good team, and I think a reporter wanted that clarified, and he basically was just saying if we're not closing out at a certain level, it changes our entire trajectory as a team. And then we'll track. There was another guy that we tried to steal some stuff from. Obviously, everybody's trying to steal from him. Crutchfield in Division Two, doing a fantastic job, and he's got a huge tree now of coaches that are pressing all over the place. But there was a nugget about him timing guys sprinting out of their trap, and so we wouldn't do that for every single practice, but we might spend a practice and time a guy sprinting. And so he knows, like, it takes me 3 seconds to get free throw line to free throw line. And then when he's jogging 2 games later and we clip that up, we'll time him, and the team will kind of laugh if it took him 5 or 6 seconds to get free throw line to free throw line. There's not a whole lot you can argue about. So we tried to chart some of that stuff. And then, just our ball screen defense, trying to figure out how do we grade that. Is there a way that we can, give guys if they were 3 out of 5 times in the ball screen, they guarded it correctly. And so, does that play into the grade that we give them at the end of the day? So we kind of played around with some of that stuff.
Does that feed into film and what you're choosing to watch? And are you watching long periods of film or smaller, shorter clips based on the things that you're grading?
And we try not to live in the film room. I think you lose them, or I mean, I lose them at a certain point. So, but at the same time, you're also trying to fight a little bit of the just teenage attention spans. And so, we're not going to sit there and only watch 3 clips after a game, but we're also going to try to keep it to a minimum. And if we show the grading, reflect a little bit of that with 5 or 6 clips. And then, we really try to celebrate our guys, especially offensively. You are what you celebrate and tolerate. And so there needs to be a healthy balance there. And, we want our guys to see all the things they're doing correctly. So it takes a few clips, but man, if we get over about 20 clips, then we probably need to come back to it right after practice, or, show a few. Sometimes we'll get them up, have them change seats, but after about 20 minutes, I feel like it's really a struggle to keep them engaged. I don't know what you do.
I think you're right on the money. It's so hard not to want to keep them in there for a long time because to me, like watching film is so much fun, and I love breaking down little parts to it. One AD I had said, Matt, you got to remember that we're the weirdos. Like we're weird, not them. And so for them not to want to watch film for an hour, that's normal. They're kids, they're teenagers. And also I think if our practices we want our practices to be a place where they can make mistakes and we're going to teach them through that. I think film session has to be there too. And I mean, you and I probably both can remember those film session with coaches where we were getting yelled at, terrified. We felt like we were horrible. Man, I don't know if that really led to me learning a lot. And so Tyler Costin kind of talks about teaching through positive clips. Instead of grabbing the 3 or 4 things that were wrong that we want to work, man, do your due diligence and find the 3 or 4 clips of that action being right. And so group setting, it's teaching through the positives. And then, and this is all I think you would agree is like, as long as attitude and effort are where they need to be, because those are the non-negotiable attitude and effort. It's like breathing. You have to do it. But when we're teaching things, and then more of the negatives or the stretches is that great one-on-one time when you can bring them in. I think protecting our guys, not their egos, not like that, but I don't think players like to be embarrassed. And I think we can probably get more to, and you nailed it, why are we doing these things in that one-on-one setting? So those are just some things that I thought about, but I love the direction that you took it with how the film connects to your analytics.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think that it hits home probably better if you pick out, like we'll have a guy that doesn't score a single point, but he blocked outright 5 times and sprinted the floor and he's in the right spots. And you try to show 2 or 3 clips of him and you're like, that's why that dude plays, man. And so, hopefully after they've seen their grading and then they watch those clips of the guy doing it the right way, it sticks. And like you said, you're not always embarrassing a guy.
Yeah. And keeping it short, I do think you're right. And as much as we like to stay in there long, I don't know what the correct amount is. I mean, I've heard, 3 and 3, 3 positives, 3 that we need to get better at, 10 minutes or less as a good time stamp. If that's the case, if 10 minutes or less is good, then I fail all the time because it's rarely 10 minutes or less.
Yeah, and I guess one mistake I made early on was just not questioning enough, and talking at guys. And then, a few film sessions in, I'm like, these dudes are just listening to me ramble. Like, we've got to let them lead the film sessions once they know what we want. And we were able to get a little bit more time out of it because they'd start analyzing it and taking ownership of it. But it took me a minute to remember that.
Man, love that. And that's something I think that's a great activity to do and have those guys be prepared to do it, not on the spot. Another thing, and coach, I can't remember where I saw it. And that's what I love about like X or Instagram is following coaches, following people and just trying things out, like constantly borrowing things. But I saw a coach that was taking his film session and getting them in groups of 2. They each had a laptop and they're each taking short parts of film, breaking it down, writing down what they see. And then they had to come together with their 2 points that they had to share. And I thought, man, that's awesome. And so we groups of 2, you've got the first quarter, 4 minutes, first quarter, second 4 minutes, second quarter, and all the way through. And I want your 2 things that you saw that were positives and 2 stretches that we need to do. It was the most fun film session we've ever had. I learned a ton. It's kind of like when you ask your players for celebrations after a game. You may think you know what you saw or how they feel, but then you actually hear them celebrate and what they notice. Man, I just learned a ton from them. And I wish I could give the person credit that I saw that do, but that's another way to
That's
do
great
that.
stuff.
I need to do it more. And that's something, it's kind of funny how like you can think of on a talk like this of some great things that we've done in the past. And then you realize, golly, like it's been a year. So, I mean, we did it once this year, but why not do that more? Why not bring them into the learning instead of, I mean, we don't want to spoon feed them. Like, we want them to be solving problems on the floor, so let's help them do that. Man, I'd love to hear some standards and pillars of your program that you set, because I don't know. I mean, Second Baptist has always been a really good program, and maybe they've had a year or so, but we played them in TABC, coach, 2 years ago. They spanked us by 30. And I remember thinking, like, these dudes are huge. Like, they're just way bigger than us. You come into your first season and you have the record, and you win a state championship. It's not just the players, it's the culture. And so what are some of those standards and pillars that you built early on?
Yeah, well, second, I give the church and the school a lot of credit. They know who they are and they really stick to it. And so one of the things they said when I interviewed was, we want to be Christ-centered and we want to be excellent. We don't want to just do one and not the other. And so, kind of that environment is already there for our guys in terms of trying to act the right way and have a certain standard that they set for themselves. But uh, I took from Carson Cunningham something called the 5 Gs, and that was grit, growth, gratitude, goodness, and the golden rule. And the one that really stuck out through the year was gratitude. I think Mark Pope had a sound bite, maybe it was in the middle of this season, where he was saying, you can, what was the direct quote? You cannot be more happy than you are grateful. And he talked about how, there's rich people that are happy, there's rich people that are sad, there's famous people that are happy, there's famous people that are sad, but you're coming back to the gratitude piece of it and how healthy that is for you. And so, we talked about gratitude before pretty much every practice, and would have a guy share what he was grateful for, and it might be something specific, or we might just kind of open it up to the room. And by the end of the year, guys had really embraced it and were thinking about those kind of things before they would get to practice. And but I think those values helped. And I think that it might have been on one of your podcasts. I heard Steve Lutz talk about he only had 3 rules. It was love your teammate, do the right thing, and do your best. And I thought, man, if I ever coach a team, that's something that I would use, because I don't want to have a lot of rules.
Yeah.
And that was about, probably a year ago, I think I heard it. And I was walking around Farmville, Virginia, and wrote it down. And so whenever I got to second, tried to really instill that. And, that goes back to that whole, like you were saying earlier in this podcast, of, if you've got the right effort and the right mindset, then like that's the standard that we're looking for. And I would always tell our guys, like, we can't get anything done if we don't have like that base standard going. And Bill Self, I grew up in Tulsa, and I loved watching Bill Self teams in the mid '90s, and he had the thing rolling, and he was really good. I think by the time he got to Kansas, he was talking about playing at the Magic level. And I don't want to say that's exactly what he was talking about. That was what I envisioned, though, was if you can play with this extreme effort and unselfishness and focus, then we're going to get to a point where now we're just talking about executing. But we can't get to like the execution piece if that other stuff isn't there. And so we just tried to get to, that magic level. Like, how long can we be there in practice? And so I think that stuff, it doesn't happen if you're not talking about your values every day, because there's not the buy-in to show up and really get after it.
I think that Mark Pope quote is awesome, and it made me think of John Gordon. I think was the one that said, "You can't have gratitude and complain. You can't do those two things at the same time." It's kind of the same idea. I think no matter what I like the 5 Gs. No matter what your acronym or what your culture is, gratitude better be in there. Like and not
Yeah.
just on a wall or on a T-shirt. It's your activity of having them share before practice. Because that, to me, like culture, I had a coach talk about it. It's lived out. Like, we live our culture. It's not just something we do at the beginning, or it's constant, right? And thankful Thursdays for us. So I just borrowed this from TJ Rosine at Emmanuel. There's a daily theme to every day, during second period, and Thursdays is Thankful Thursday. Coach, it ends up being our best workout. It's our best day. It's our best practice. They get in groups of 2. Oh no, that's tough Tuesday. Thankful Thursday, they're in kind of smaller groups, but they're thanking things. And then sometimes we even have a big group. We just go around and we're something we're thankful for. And your school, my school, our kids are blessed. They're pretty lucky to be there. There's a lot of things that had to line up the right way for them to be at our schools. But we need to remind them to have that gratitude. But it's kind of like the foundation that you said of attitude and effort. When gratitude is also a part of that, then you get to be great teammates. Then you get to share the ball. Then you get to celebrate each other. But without that, I just think all the negative parts that you hear about, maybe the selfishness and things, those creep in when gratitude isn't there.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's spot on.
How do you teach grit?
Well, if you're going by the definition of passion and perseverance for long-term goals, then I think you got to get on the same page with your guys on what are our goals, and are you really sure that you want to be here? You know, I think that's a different discussion at every level. Here, that discussion is, there's a million things that you can do at our school. I mean, our theater department's incredible. Our sports, I mean, we've got state championships in football, baseball. Most of our guys are in the choir. I mean, there is a ton of options. And so we try to balance it out of, I want as many guys as possible in our basketball program, but then if you're going to play on the varsity, there's another level of expectation. And so, are you sure that you want to be all in with that? And luckily, we have a really good nucleus of guys that are all about it. And so that passion is kind of there. I'm just trying to help feed it. And, my assistants are really good at doing that. But now if we're talking about like what are our goals and are those goals actually, controllable? Like, can we measure them, or is it, what somebody else is saying about us or what we're getting ranked? Just trying to kind of strip away the stuff that we can't control. I think that's the stuff that plays into, now do we have some grit? And now we got to formulate our practices and our get-togethers around some of that stuff and figure out when are we trying to fight through stuff and when do we need a break. But I don't think you get any of that if you don't sit down as a team and figure out what are we actually aiming for.
I'm glad you mentioned the part about how many options these kids have, because I don't know, some people that maybe aren't at private schools, they think of it as kind of like a fairy tale land, like everything is just great at these private schools. And the way you talked about second is the way I feel about faith. Like they're great people, love the mission of the school, but with such a small number and them feeling the pressure or trying to be excellent in so many things. Golly, like, I mean, at the Colony High School, we had 560 kids in my class. Football never once came and asked me to play. So that shows you the level of athlete that I was, the fact that they didn't have any interest. But but it was also so big that, man, I had to focus on this one thing to be really, really good at it. Like you said, they've got the theater, they got speech, there's NHS, there's all these different things that they can be a part of. And because they're at a small school, we need people to be a part of all those things. Coach, I don't know if I've always been great about promoting the balance or helping them through those situations, but you're right. Like I want excellence. I want dudes that love to be in the gym, but how do you handle it when, hey, coach, I know we've got this going on, but I've got a Costa Rica trip that I'm going to go on, with our Spanish class, and it's in January. Like, how do you handle those situations?
Yeah, I think early on in the year, obviously there's expectations that get sent out to the players and the parents of, here's the stuff that, we expect you to be at. And then like we were lucky that the majority of our guys they were all in. So if there was somebody that was going to
Yeah.
miss for something during the season, it's like, hey, I get it, but your playing time might be shifted a little bit. Or if you're starting and you got to go on this trip during the year, then you're not going to start when you come back. And if there's enough competition among the team, then there's a little bit of, all right, well, you might not get your spot back. But
Natural consequences to it. Yeah.
yeah, Yeah, but we try to gatekeep a little bit with that before you even get to varsity. If like I try to give 13 or 14 days off. I don't know if we'll do that again this year, but our JV try to give them 2 weeks off in Christmas and be like, do what you got to do and enjoy time with family.
Yeah.
And varsity, enjoy your time with family, but it's going to be like 5 days because we've got this Christmas tournament. And then just making sure that guys, as they're moving up through our program, understand like, all right, if you're going to play varsity now, that's a different discussion. And then, I think the last part of that grit is really just embracing failing. And we have a lot of guys that I don't know if it just comes natural to them or what the deal is, but they were really good this year at wanting to play hard games and trying to figure out how to learn from it. And we got to pick them up every once in a while, but it was a really good unit in terms of we'd lose a game by 7 or 8, and they were glad that we played it, and they want to play the best teams. Every time I'd ask them somebody we're putting on the schedule, they'd always get excited about it. So I was like, all right, let's go do it. And I think that plays into if you're gonna fight through some things and get better, you gotta wanna play the best teams. You gotta wanna be okay with making some mistakes and failing.
I think there's two places where culture really shows up, and not the acronym or the list of words, but like how it actually is in your team. And one is with shot selection. I think that's where culture shows up. But the other is when you lose, because when you're winning, so much is like, how can anybody complain? We're winning. How can anybody be upset? We're winning. But when you lose, you really get to know about your culture and your team. And when they react like that, man, like, you got something special. And so I think those two parts are huge. And then you said something really quick, but I think it's the key. It's the clear expectations. You set those early, but that requires us to be organized early. So the calendar for what the season looks like needs to come out super early. And whether you're a private school or not, to give parents enough time to see, okay, in 4 months, what do we have? Oh yeah, I can't go on a trip then. If you're organized with and you have those clear expectations, then you don't put yourself in that hole of, oh, hey, by the way, we're doing this. What? I already have this planned. Sorry, if you're all in, you got to be with us. No, that doesn't work. We have to be better and your clear expectations, like you mentioned. That's it.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think you put it really well right there.
So I think you had your starting quarterback was one of your players, or he was a really good football player.
Yeah, Can and Toon. They made it to the state championship game, and then he joined us, I think, 2 days later. And great player, great kid, really unselfish. Just kind of embodied all the stuff that we'd been talking about while he was playing football, and then came over and he just hopped right in and did a great job.
So how do you balance the two sport athletes? Because I think whether you're at a small school or a big school, if you've got some guys that are athletic enough and good enough to do both and will add value in both, what do you do to make that a good environment for them?
Yeah, I think at least here, we have to do it on a case by case basis. And so if it's a freshman, I usually just say, man, you should play everything and figure out what you want to do. Once they start getting into sophomore and junior year, then there's a discussion of like, what do you really want? Like, do you want to play college football? Do you want to play college basketball? Or are you like, man, I just love being a high school athlete. I like doing as much as I can. I want to know what it is that they want to do. And if you tell me like, hey, I want to play college basketball, then I'm probably going to be like, well, that started, yesterday. We got to get on it. And unless
So
you're
it's, what do
just,
I do? You build a time machine and you go back. Yeah.
but if you're Deion Sanders, then like keep playing both. I like
Yeah.
that we need guys to play multiple sports here. But if you're telling me what your dream is and it's going to require more than what you're being able to contribute right now playing two sports, well, then that's when I'm going to say, hey, you should make a decision then. But most of the time, we're able to kind of figure out what those guys want to do, and our coaches, our football and baseball coaches are great. They're on the same page with guys in terms of trying to figure that stuff out. So we've had
I love the way.
all three levels.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say we've had all three levels. Cannon was a guy that did both. We had another guy that decided he wasn't going to be able to do football because he wants to pursue basketball. And then we've got another one that, he'll move up slower in basketball, but he's okay with that. He's going to go ahead and focus on football primarily.
I just love the way you put it. That you got to figure out what they want. Like, what do you want to do? And I think once they tell us what that is, without us leading them any direction, then we manage that, we honor that, we try to keep the passive aggressive tones, or definitely don't penalize them for that. And we kind of talked about that earlier with the natural consequences to missing things is that, man, other guys are going to get better and they can possibly take your spot. It's the same thing with missing 3 or 4 months at a time doing something else. But if it's what they want to do, and they're capable, then we make that work. And what I don't like is the idea of they should do everything. Why? Why? Like, if they don't want to, if they only want to do one thing, then man, honor that. Let's be all for that. But we're never going to force them to only do one thing or to make a choice. But you're right. The point of no return for me is when a kid says, I want to play college basketball. Okay, we need to have a serious talk then about your time, what you're doing. It's an insane game of musical chairs. It's one chair with 75 dudes walking around it, and you got to beat them for that chair. What are you willing to do? That may mean that you sacrifice some things. Man, I feel like sometimes that's an unpopular way to look at it. But if you don't want to play college basketball, man, do everything. But if you're gifted or blessed enough to still be able to do it and you get to, then you're lucky. That's awesome. We'll meet you where you are. But I don't know. I just rambled a little bit there, but that always kind of fires me up when I see oh man, kids should play everything. And maybe through 8th grade. I don't know.
Oh, no, I totally agree. And, you know, eh, aside from the LeBrons of the world that, they just fly through
Can't
levels.
use him. You can't use him as a reason that it works. He's a freak of nature. Don't use
Yeah.
the exception, Coach. I'm getting fired. I'm sorry. I'm getting fired
No,
up.
I'm
Don't
saying
use the exception to prove. Yeah, I
I'm
agree with
saying
you. Yeah.
most of us were time and age is on our side in terms of trying to explain to them like, dude, I went through this and I know that you might be way better than I was, but at some point you're going to hit that competition, that musical chair group that you're talking about, and if you're not devoting enough time to it, you're going to regret that you didn't if you love it as much as you're telling me. So I think that we owe it to explain to them what is required to get where they want to go. If we have any idea of what that takes, and if you played college basketball or you played basketball, further than high school, then you need to try to instill some of that requirement on them.
Just said it. You no regret. And if they feel like they're going to regret not playing everything, well, then they better play everything. They better try their best to do that.
Yeah,
But then, like you said, what's the worst pain? It's regret. It's not discipline. And so being disciplined so that when they're done, like, man, you shot your shot. You took your shot. Like, you did your
hmm
very, very best. And maybe you get to the place you want to be, or you settle for something a little bit less, but you have no regret. I think it's the same for our team. But that also can be the other side of it, where kid wants no regrets. He wants to play it all. We got to create, I'm not going to say safe space. I'm not going to say that, but we got to create an environment where they can do that. And they're made to feel less than, or like they're making a mistake. Right.
for sure, for sure.
I thought your guys did play with a lot of confidence. And I'm not in the camp that believes that we can create confidence in players. I don't think we build it, but we can protect it and help it move a little bit. But how did you get your guys playing with such confidence? And maybe when it drops, what'd you do to help build it back up?
And we tried to show them rather than tell them. You know, I think that there's some things pregame that, obviously you can do to help motivate guys. But if you're telling a guy he's a great shooter, but the numbers don't back it up, the confidence isn't really going to be there. So again, we just can only manage what you measure. And if it's a guy that's a good shooter, then I'm trying to show him what his practice numbers look like week over week. And by the time the season's starting, it's like, man, you just went from shooting 65 out of 100 threes to 80 out of 100 uncontested. Like, if you're open, like, let that thing fly. And so, whatever area that guy's strength was, we tried to show him and chart it and, really back that up with some numbers. And then I think it does help if there's a balance between how you approach defense and how you approach offense. I think that defense, it's pretty obvious, black and white in terms of what our rules are, and if you're not playing hard enough, if you're not close, it's really easy to just point out and hold a guy accountable, and you're not going to get in his head. He's not going to be a bad defensive player because you've got on him about something. But on offense, you got to give some freedom, and there's more art to it. So, once guys have put the work in and you've tried to put them in some spots to succeed, then you got to be okay with, like, there's going to be some mistakes that you can't just feel like you're gripping the steering wheel as tight as possible. That guys can feel that.
It's a great point. You rarely you hear people say, he really hurt my defensive confidence. Like, you don't hear that, but you'll hear him say, man, he took my confidence with my shot, with my handle. That's a good point.
And I think our guys, hopefully they played with more freedom on offense and more confidence, knowing that, man, if I do what I'm supposed to do on the other end, he's going to let me play a little bit. And then, there's a lot of responsibility with that. But if you really love the guys that you're playing with and you're really trying to win and approach the team goal, then I think that the shot selection stuff you're talking about, it starts to take care of itself a little bit.
Yeah. And I think it goes back to also what you mentioned of assuming that they put in the work, because that's where does confidence come from? Preparation and what you think about. So once they've taken care of those two things, all what we get to do is remind them of who they are, remind them of the work that they've done. And I love the story of David. David was he was using visualization, I think, before Kobe did. And so David, is going out to meet Goliath, and people are like, oh, you're going to get killed. Like, how can you even think about doing this? And David said, no, listen, in the past, I've killed lions and I've killed bears. Like, he was thinking about those past victories, the past work that he has done, and that allowed him to be confident, obviously, and too, with God on his side. But I think as coaches, man, that's a really big role for us is, hey, you're 0 for 4, but what's about to happen? Coach, I'm about to go off. Yeah, you're about to hit a streak right now because of the work. We've seen you do this before. And I think when we can remind them of those things, man, that can be powerful too.
Oh, totally. It's a great story with David. And I remember hearing one about the Spurs. It was probably 10 years ago, but they were on a road trip, and Manu had gone like 0 for 5 or 0 for 6, and he was quoted as saying that when he goes in one of those stretches, he gets really excited because he knows that he's a 40% 3-point shooter. Then at some point it's going to even out and he's going to get hot. And so I thought that was a great approach, and we try to do that with our guys, whether it's shooting or something else that they should be super confident in.
Coach, can you really get guys to that level? 'Cause I just don't hear that a lot or see that a lot. And because, like, you hear a story, you're like, wow, that's special. I mean, can you get guys there?
I don't know about that, but I think that you can definitely have a huge impact on them. And I know you can, because I remember Joey Wright played at Texas, was in Australia, and I was on a recruiting trip over there. And I was asking Joey about playing for Penders at Texas. And he said, I came across half court one time and I was open from like 25 and I didn't shoot it and he took me out. And he told me that he was going to take me out every time I didn't shoot when I was open like that. And he goes, I let it fly for the rest of my career. And he goes, I played so much better than guys that I knew growing up that were actually better than me prior to college. He goes, but they didn't have that type of freedom. And so, yeah, with great freedom comes great responsibility. But, if you can get that type of mindset into a guy like, man, I'm taking you out if you don't do what you're great at out there. I think that has a major impact.
I love that. That's a mind shift, right? From how I was coached in college is before Coach Drew. My first coach, that was not, I knew if I missed my first shot, I probably wasn't going to play a lot that game. If I luckily banked it in from the corner like I did against Oklahoma State, a 15-footer that I banked in from the corner, I played a ton that game because it went in. Like it was so transactional. And like you said, a great point. I think defensively, you didn't get a hand up. It was it's a 7. It's a wide open jump shot. Make it a 6. Like you didn't do it. It's so easy to see. But on offense, it is a little bit more about the try and the fact that you can do everything right and still fail and still miss the shot or do it. But if you can create that type of environment where they know, like, how about if they go home to their parents and why'd you come out? It's because I didn't shoot. Why is he getting on to you? It's because I wasn't aggressive attacking the paint. Let's build that type of culture in them, that they want to please us. They want to do the things that we believe that they can, and there's a consequence for not doing it instead of just pleading with them. But I think the opposite happens a lot. Happened to me is where you miss a shot or you do make a mistake and you get pulled out, and then there's fear and you don't get guys playing with courage. I think that if a parent or another coach will say, guys, your guys play with such courage, that has to be one of the best compliments that we can get, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think every coach has their own approach for how they can get to that point. But what I really love about some of the stuff that we've been watching with, like I said, the Division II guys, Crutchfield, and some of those guys, Missoula's doing it with the Celtics. Of if we can create that possession gap to be big enough, then you should play with even more confidence, because not that the possessions don't mean more, but man, if we're going to get 10, 15 more shots, or we're going to win the turnover and the rebound battle, and we're going to crush them in those areas so much that you can play loose. I think that there's a way to help your team with that. I don't know if it changes every year depending on the type of personnel you have.
Playing loose is something that I would love for my teams to do, but I've always wondered, like, how do I get them there? And so is it before a game? How serious do we need to be? How focused do they need to be? Are they a team that if they're joking around a little bit before the game, like, they can still come out and perform, and and loose doesn't mean lazy, right? But how do you go about before games knowing like where they need to be? Is it like you said, is it dependent on the year and on the team? Is there a way that you'd like for them to be focused and ready to go, or um, do you leave it up to them?
Sure, there's some indicators on game day of if they're focused or not, but the the biggest fight that we have is we want the game to feel easy. And I've never gotten to watch a UConn practice, but I know that like that's a Hurley approach in terms of, those guys get after it in practice. And then when they get out there in the game, uh, when it feels easier out there, then I think guys loosen up. So regardless if guys are a little bit uptight or not in our games, if we were able to string together 2 or 3 good weeks of practice and feel like we were tough on them without going berserk, but we just want to make sure that the game feels like the easiest part of the week for you. And if you do that, then I'm not going to have to try to make up some speech or anything like that. Just when the ball gets thrown up out there, you're going to feel like it's a little bit slower than it was the previous 2 or 3 days.
How many of those big speeches do you feel like you have in you in a season before they stop listening?
That's a good question. I mean, I'm the inexperienced one here. You probably know that better than me, but I think that it probably depends on
I've
the
never
season.
won a
There's
state championship, coach. I'm just saying I don't know about the experience part, and you're a darn good player. So yeah, no, keep going.
Oh man, there's 3 or 4 times this year where I got a little fired up, and I'm usually pretty calm. So I think the guys they got a kick out of it too. But again, there was a point in this season where we weren't playing great early in the year, and we were playing at St. Thomas, and I said a few things in the locker room, and one of our big guys was not rolling, and I just started screaming at him to roll, and we came out in the second half and played fine, ended up winning the game, and like the guys and their parents were both laughing with me after the game about it, joking around. And so that's when I was like, man, we've got a pretty emotionally intelligent type of team here. If they can take some criticism in the game and then joke about it afterward and not think that I'm, just completely psycho. So
That's a good place to be. Balance is hard. Mike Neighbors said, "Don't try to have balance. It's impossible." But I've made a lot of mistakes over the years of, spending too much time either up at the school or even when I come home, not disconnecting. So like maybe I'm here, but I'm on huddle here, or I'm doing something here. So how do you balance um, coaching? Because you've been at all different levels in your family life.
yeah, my parents were a great example for me and my brother. Um, my dad worked all over the place, and I think he probably announced some of your games in the Big 12, and uh, did a great job of making every effort he could to get to games. Though, like I knew he was taking a connecting flight and landing and hustling to a game that started 30 minutes after the plane landed, and then he'd drive us all home from a big tournament that summer where it took him a day to get there. And so anyway, the effort that my dad made, the effort that my mom made, getting me to different places, and then like just watching how they treated each other. Um, they were very authentic. It wasn't fake. They let us see them care about each other. They let us see whenever they would argue here and there, and it just really made me value the relationship for whoever I ended up marrying. And then my wife I mean, she's great about letting me know when I'm in outer space and still thinking about basketball. But last year, Marty McGillen gave me a really good quote. I think it might have been from one of his mentors or coaches, and he said, "When you finish practice and you're driving home, pick a spot on your drive home, whether it's a billboard or a store or a sign, and at some point when you see that landmark, your brain should switch over to being at home and being whatever you are, a husband, a father, and then you're able to do the same thing coming back out when you head to the gym." But I thought that was really good. On at some point when you leave practice, there needs to be a trigger to being like, all right, am I shutting it off for the next 3 hours to be present here at dinner with my family, and then maybe I got to get to something at night, but I got to compartmentalize if I really care about my relationships.
I love that. That's a great nugget that I need to find. I need to find something on the way home. That's helpful. And David Peeler from Highland Park, in our hoops talk, man, he said something about there's a sign that he has in his garage right up above the door, and he says, "Don't fail at the job that only you can do." Like
I
as
like
as
that.
great as you are, and me at Faith and anybody anywhere, if we leave, someone else is going to take that job. It's someone else is going to do their very, very best. But here, with our kids, with our spouse, uh, it's only us that can do that, and we can't fail. But man, I definitely, these are all reminders for myself, because I want things to be excellent. I want to make the big time where we are, but then it can't be. It just goes back to, your faith. I mean, who's really in charge of your life? Like if you rip open your chest, think when you and I were younger, just based on the player that you were, probably basketball at some point was God of our life. Whether we realized it or not, even growing up as believers. But man, how
Oh,
easy is
absolutely.
it for this job, our team, our season, even at the high school level, at 5A taps, it can become the most important thing to us. And then all of a sudden, our walk is failing and failing with others. I need to find that billboard, that restaurant, that when I pass it, I'm able to disconnect. And do you have a spot like that?
Yeah, and I live about 3 minutes from the school, so I got to figure it out pretty quick.
Quick, quick, quick.
And
That's
we,
good.
we don't have kids yet, and so for me, it's at like 10 o'clock at night. Sometimes I'm getting some stuff done, but I know that when I get home at 6, there needs to be a 3-4 hour window where I'm really present, and then if I got to get to some stuff later on, I can. But I think it's different for
Yeah.
everybody on how they kind of situate their day. Is there anything over your years of coaching that you've pivoted to or that's really stuck with you?
In this arena of
Yeah.
balancing,
Yeah.
well, I'll give my wife credit on this one. Um, so going from McKinney High as a varsity assistant, and I was single for the first 4 years of that, and then met her for the last year. And I believe God put her in my life, catalyst for change. It's kind of like there's a pre-Jana part of my life and then post-Jana, and very thankful for the post. And so, when I got the job at Faith, and I was 30 years old, and I thought, okay, now that I'm a head coach, I'm going to be all in with my time. I'm going to eat and sleep this. This is all I'm going to do. And so I was at a 24-hour fitness working out, and I was kind of going through this mindset of like how hardcore I was going to be as a coach, the guy that nobody outworked and all this stuff. And so I called her and we're talking. I said, babe, I just wanted to let you know that, this starts at Faith, like I'm going to be spending a lot of time up there. Like I'm going to be doing a lot because that's what it takes. And there's like this pause on the phone. And she said, Matt, like, because this is my second marriage, is her second marriage as well. And she just said, I've already lived that before. Like, I'm not doing that. And it was just kind of this moment, like, one, I would never want to hurt her feelings or make her feel less than or make her feel alone or lonely. But it was like this sincerity that she said it kind of melted that whole idea of what I thought I needed to be as a head coach was kind of gone. Like in that moment of, okay, now I don't know where she is in here. She's probably listening like, whatever, like you're always gone, or always thinking about things. But she's also, it's helped having my son at Faith, that I've been coaching him all the way through. So she's been as invested, especially as he's been in high school. But that's just always something that I've remembered of like, no, I'm not going to let the profession, the job take the place of her. And then more importantly, and that's where kids like Jax, that remind me of how important my walk is. When basketball starts to feel so big and I'm stressing out about it so much, most likely my walk isn't where it should be. I'm not in the word as much. I'm not listening to worship music. I'm so fixated on this. And I don't care what level you are. If you care and you want to be excellent and you want to do your very, very best, then there's going to be a certain amount of attention that goes to it. But man, like Coach Peeler's sign, like nothing should make us fail in the spot that God has us here at home. And so I don't know if it's like a thing that I necessarily did as much as she set the path of what this was gonna look like. And again, I've failed over the years a ton, sleepless nights a ton, and then but just trying to remember that.
Yeah, that's great. While you were talking about that, it did remind me that I've been very lucky to always work for people that care about their faith and their family. And so never really been put in an environment where I slipped out of that route. And so I think over the years it's been very helpful just to watch, guys like Griff Aldrich and Carson Cunningham and Mark Utley and Ryan Mark, like everybody that I've played and coached for really cares about keeping the main thing, and that's been super helpful.
We need to help our players do that too. It's our job, but it's their game. And I think we can put so much pressure on how big this moment is, how big the game is coming up, or how every day and every moment. I believe all these things. Every moment is important. Like we're trying to be 1-0 today. Like I like all those ideas. But who was it? Tobin Anderson when they were making that great run that in the press conference said like our idea is 2-22, 2-22, and he was like 2 hours of the day we are all in on basketball. And the other 22, we're not thinking about it at all. And I love that. Like I think it's maybe impossible, but the idea, especially with our players, of hey, these 2 hours that we talked about with film, right? Like short attention spans. Hey, but for these 2 hours though, hour and a half, wherever you go, all in, all focus, letting everything else go. The test you have, the date you have, the opponent we have, like all in here. But then disconnect, go be a kid, play Fortnite, study, hang out. Tomorrow will take care of itself. And I think that 2-22, I've never really made that a thing at our school or with our team. But I think the older I get and the more I do it, I believe in that more and more. We probably have happier players if we were encouraging them to disconnect more. That doesn't mean care less, right?
Oh yeah, totally. I think that's the questions: who am I? Where am I? What am I doing? How often throughout the day can you stay present in what you're actually doing?
I'm just chuckling because I thought I never want to on here. I never want to try to act like like I have things figured out, or like I really that I know I have answers. And just the whole thing with Janet, like I loved your question back to me because I get to ask all these, but I rarely answer them. And so, but just thinking like, what would she say? Like, what would she say? How I've done the last 12 years in that arena of balancing life, and maybe that's a something that we need to do is because we check in with our players, we ask them how they're feeling about the culture. Hey, what's the pulse of the team right now? It's a great question to ask some of your leaders. But how often do I ask her? And maybe I don't ask her because I don't really want to. I'm terrified to know the answer. But that's sorry. I was just chuckling a little bit of like, dude, you sound like you. She said this and you got it. And you've never. No, I don't know if I do it right.
No, you're right. You're right. Sometimes I think I pat myself on the back because I realize like, okay, I've zoned out for the last half hour, and I'm going to apologize and that kind of thing. But I probably am scared to ask her sometimes of how often this happens and how much work I need to do in that arena.
Yeah. Thankfully, she's been super honest with me over the years with coaching of like, man, because she does my book most of the time. So it's like, yeah, it was a great game. I thought you coached really well. Oh, thank you. But then there's times where, especially as Landon has kind of gotten into the high school and through our program, she would say, Matt, your face tonight, your face, just not like, oh, that hurts my feelings, but thank you. I need to hear it. You got to have that person in your life. Coach, the speed round. Before I let you go, these are going to be quick questions. Anybody that knows you, your brother, they're really going to know you after this. Ready? All right. Favorite ice cream flavor?
Mint chocolate chip.
Same. Love that. Now, you paused. Is it you're not really an ice cream guy, or that is that you're just thinking about all the flavors?
I don't eat a ton of it, and I'm between mint chocolate chip and chocolate chip cookie dough. So,
Okay.
had to be.
If you had to go like a cheat meal, because with your workout routine in the morning and night, your body's your temple. I get that. If you had to go to something, what would it be?
Burgers, man. There's so many great burger spots in Houston. I just
Yeah.
had Clutch City Grill the other night. I mean, I could do burgers every day.
As a guy that I try to eat a ton of meat, throughout. I don't know if I view burgers as it depends on what you're putting on it, I guess, with the bun and everything. But give me ground beef all day, Coach. I'm in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Greatest shooter of all time.
Pete Maravich.
Man, that's a good
Just
answer.
for his era, I think that he was doing a lot of things that nobody else was doing. So that kind of elevates him in my mind.
If there would have been a 3-point line, he would have averaged over 50 points a game from where he was
Yep.
shooting.
Yep.
That's good. Do you stand up or sit down during games?
Both. Normally I'm standing, but I want my opinion of my assistants a lot. So it's just a lot of back and forth.
That's good. Steve Kerr talked about that um, in a press conference somewhere about how it tries to be really random with when he stands and sits because he doesn't want players to read into it too much. Like, and I'm guilty of this. I try not to verbally get upset with misses, especially our open threes that we are within our shot scale and we're good with. I just want to celebrate and hey, next, next, next. But if it's a shot that either we really needed or I'm like, should have knocked that down. I go and sit sometimes. And it's kind of like you can almost see a pattern with that. I like the idea of Steve Kerr being random with it, sometimes up, sometimes down. Not up when they need more energy or not down when we're upset. So there's no pattern to it. But I like your way of thinking about it too with listening to your assistant coaches. Top 3 dinner guests, any time period.
And that's good. I'll go with we'll go across 3 spectrums. I'll go with JFK, Will Ferrell, and Michael Jordan.
I have had someone else say Michael Jordan and Will Ferrell in the same meal, so you're close there. The JFK one. Do you mind kind of why?
Just give me some humor, give me some sports, obviously, give me some politics. Just give me a good random group of 3 guys that are interesting people, and we're at the top of their profession. I think it'd be a lot of fun.
Like that. Best basketball movie of all time.
Hoosiers.
Do you text with 1 thumb or with 2?
I got to think about that. 2.
I'm trying to get there, Coach. I'm a 1 thumber, and it takes me forever. And then Coach Charlie Melton, the Baylor men's strength coach, said he's got into the swiping text where you can, and that's like a whole other arena of texting I don't even know about.
Yeah.
For high school, shot clock or no shot clock?
Shot clock. Shot clock. Shot clock.
Yeah. You think it's coming?
Yes. Yes.
SPC is doing it already.
Yeah. And in Oklahoma, and so they're starting to corner UIL, I think, and if UIL does it, then TAPS will do it, and so
I saw
think it'd be great.
that they were texting about that. TABC was about this email that's going out to all the ADs and how we need to talk, or the UIL coaches need to talk to them about that. And I'm hoping they do get on board, so then TAPS will follow. And you know what, Coach? It's going to be okay because we play in the Cistercian tournament, and they have a shot clock. They have one in both of their gyms. The same person that's working the score and the clock works the shot clock. It's just a little handheld thing. And over the course of 4 games, 3 or 4 times, maybe, and hardly any mistakes, it's not that big a deal.
Yeah. I think that I hear you that it's there's some areas, especially 1A, 2A, they got limited resources and people able to do it, but they were doing that in remote towns in Australia for 12 and under games. So it could be done here.
What time would you like to see it at?
I'd be fine with it. I'm not really not that picky on the time, but 30 is fine. 35, just get it up there, get something going with a shot clock. But 35 or 30 is fine with me. But I really think that the decision making, the speed of the game, even the relationships of the coaches with the players. I mean, it's hard not to get mad at your guys for taking a bad shot when there's no shot clock. I mean, it's just logic to say, hey, you can hold that ball as long as you need to get a great shot. But if you get a shot clock in there, it just changes the whole dynamic of the communication between coach and player too. So, just get some time going on it.
Player gets their second foul in the first half. Do they sit the rest of the half? Or their second foul? Yeah, did I say
Depends.
second foul? Yeah.
Yeah, depends is probably the normal answer on what kind of player you have. I would love to not sit them majority of the time. I want them to learn how to play with fouls, but until they can do that, sometimes you do. But I think Nate Oates is starting to do that more. There's a lot more coaches that are looking at the analytical side of it. We were talking about early in the podcast. I think that guys, if they can learn to play with fouls, you hopefully can keep them in the game longer.
That's what Nate Oates said. Said fouls happen. Doesn't happen if it doesn't matter if it happens in the first 5 minutes or the last 5 minutes. What's the difference? And I think I like the guys that kind of challenge a little bit of the reason is because it's always been done that way, or the reason is because my coaches did that. And so those dudes that are out there kind of pushing boundaries a little bit with those things, I always pay attention.
Sorry about that.
Favorite holiday?
Christmas.
All right, good one. What book would you give someone?
Man, the Bible. But if I can go
Take
with
that
two
off
books,
the table. Off the table.
One of the recent ones that we've talked about a little bit here is the Captain Class, and guy goes. Actually, I'm embarrassed that I can't remember his name right now. But
Okay.
goes around the world looking for the greatest sports teams of all time and trying to figure out what they all had in common and what classifies as a dynasty, and eventually it whittles down to looking at the type of captains that they had leading the team and how these guys were on a lot of times they were unconventional.
That sounds a little bit like Talent Code. I don't know if you've ever read Talent Code or anything
No.
like that, but similar, where this guy went around to places where there's a hotbed of success, but in like different arenas like soccer, or there's one that was musicians. And in this little place, like a huge percentage of the best came out of that place. And what's the difference? Like, what are they doing? And a lot of it has to do with the type of practice that they do in those areas. So, but the Captain Class, it kind of sounds like that a little bit.
Yeah, and it was Sam Walker that wrote it, but it's a good one.
Okay. Awesome. All right, two more. If this was your last year of coaching, what would you do more of?
And I love practices. So without burning our guys out, I would really try to spend as much time as I could at practice. That's some of the most enjoyable time to me. And the before and after parts of practice, I would not rush. I would try to be present before practice, catching up with guys, whether it's on the court or film, hanging around afterward. I would really try to absorb the 30 minutes before and after practices and the practices themselves. I mean, it's just great time you get to spend with guys if you got a team that knows how to connect.
That's the good stuff right there. Last one, in basketball as a player, who's the GOAT?
Jordan.
I mean, he's at your dinner, like.
Yeah. At least till we have dinner.
That's right. Coach, this was awesome, man. Like, so much fun to get to know you, and really enjoyed watching you coach. And I'm glad you mentioned that about your assistants and when you sit, because I was blown away by your interaction with them and how much you look to ask questions or listen to them. The bench culture, but it was so much fun to watch you guys play, but even more to get to learn from you and have this time. So, man, I really appreciate it.
Oh, the feeling's mutual. Been a fan for a long time, and thanks a lot for your insight and for having me on the show.
Thank you for checking out today's episode. Please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast, share it with your fellow coaches, and find us on social media for what's coming up next on the Jamodi Podcast. It's just a matter of doing it.